Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. We've definitely got something special lined up for you today. We are going to be diving into the world of leadership with the amazing Jenna Stoliker. Jenna's not just any leadership coach. She's the powerhouse behind the Center for Conscious Leadership LLC. Today, we're going to be chatting about some important leadership topics. First up, we're going to be talking about why trust is the glue that holds great teams together and how you can start building it right now. Then we're going to shift into what psychological safety is, why it matters, and how it can make or break your team's success. And of course, we'll bust some myths about feminine leadership and show you how women can lead with confidence and strength. Jenna is all about helping women leaders step into their power, make bold decisions, and navigate the craziness of today's workplace with grace and clarity. So grab your cup of coffee or your energy drink and stay tuned for this awesome conversation. You definitely won't want to miss Jenna's insights and the tools she's using to help leaders like you thrive today. Stay tuned. Are you ready to accelerate your career? Whether you're just starting out, making your move up the ladder, or ready to take the fast lane, there's one question you need to ask yourself. Where do I stand? Introducing the Promotion Readiness Quiz. In just a few minutes, discover if you're an emerging leader, a progressive pro, or a career trailblazer. Get tailored tips and strategies to help you grow, elevate your skills, and move forward faster. Curious? Take the quiz now and step into the next chapter of your career with confidence. Unlock your potential today. Your career breakthrough starts here. Take the Promotion Readiness Quiz now. Jenna, thank you so much for being here on the No Woman Left Behind podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you about all things leadership. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing well. And thank you so much for having me. I love being in this space with you, Rosie.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so as you well know, we cater to women in the corporate space. And Jenna, if someone were in the corporate space and they have lost their passion for their work or being at their job and they have to stay there because of, finances or whatever, how would you suggest that they start exploring or reflecting to kind of get that passion back?
Right. That's a great question because I think we've probably all been there at some point where you realize the things that drove you into the career that you have don't have that same pizzazz, right? It's not grabbing you in the same way. So I've been there myself probably a few times over the career. And what I've discovered, not only just for myself, but with many of the women that I work with, is it takes us a moment to reflect on, so what got us here? Why are we feeling that lack of energy or that connection to what really drove us there in the first place? What ignited our passion? The quick answer is, I would say, let's take some time to just pause and reflect on what are your values? Like, what's driving you? What drove you? I keep saying drove, but I'm thinking like energized you to take or say yes to the opportunities that were presented to you as you're building your career. And are those values the same or have they shifted?
Mm.
And so as you think about it, it's not that, your values could change, but sometimes they just get reprioritized because your life is different today than it was, whether it was 5 years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? Your life and your experiences shift. And so I think your values sometimes get reprioritized. Right?
Absolutely.
And I think that sometimes we might overlook that and we think, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have the same passion? And so I would say point to the values piece first and say, let's explore what that looks like for you now.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And actually, oh my gosh, this conversation is perfect for today because just yesterday, so I do certified high performance coaching for high performers. And once they're done with their program, they kind of fold into my membership. And I had a member yesterday. We worked together in January just to kind of come up with her. We do this exercise where it's called a clarity chart, and it's 9 words that define who you are today and how you want to think of yourself in the future. And when we did it in January, we just happened to, be able to do it again yesterday. And even 7 months ago from where she started in January, she was looking for a job at the time. She was kind of struggling with confidence. We worked through the program, a lot of confidence building through preparation. And then yesterday, when we did her clarity chart, it was night and day. Confident. She knows exactly where she's going. So I think, and the tie-in here is that we spent an hour yesterday just kind of revisiting the information, revisiting her values, and when we were kind of tweaking around. I love doing the clarity session because those 9 words are so powerful, and we kind of play around with them, and we were like, no, that's not the right word, and it was wonderful. So I love your response as far as taking just the time to reflect, because so often we're in this like busyness of our life, and we're not really thinking about what we want or how we want to appear in the world. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, it does. And I really appreciate how you just shared. It is about pausing and reflecting on that. I mean, I think when I think of leadership and what makes a really strong leader is there is a reflective practice that is so innate to
Mm.
how that person leads, right? And revisiting those values, what's coming to mind now is I think oftentimes, especially when we think about our careers, we think that the trajectory looks like a straight line that heads up.
Mhm.
It is not, right? We circle, and sometimes we say, oh, we're taking 2 steps back for every step forward or whatever the steps might be. But I think it really speaks to there is a circular way of how we evolve in this world, and that relates to our career as well.
Mhm.
And so,
Absolutely.
right, so pausing the reflective practice, revisiting your values. And I think what I also heard you say is what you're able to take your client through is yet another pass at discerning the definition of that value, because what that value meant to that person, 6 to 9 months ago, you learn more, right? And so you find the words that resonate with you more, and your definition and how you define what that particular value means for you shifts.
Exactly. Exactly. Which brings me to the topic of self-trust and trusting others. Having those leadership styles of trust. I know that some managers, and I was a manager for a really long time in the corporate world. I spent over 30 years in the corporate world. And you could tell the managers that really were vested in their people, as human beings versus just employees. And so let's talk a little bit about your knowledge on trusting and styles of trusting, because that could be very different.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Right. Well, I mean, it is driven by our thoughts, our beliefs, our values, right? Because that's what drives our behavior. And
Mhm.
what we also want to be true is we all look at developing relationships from a slightly different lens. Doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just first we have to accept and acknowledge we all come from different walks of life, and how we are, I don't know, our innate DNA and our life experiences impact how we connect with one another. So first, let's say building trust it's about respect, and it's
Yeah,
acknowledging that I might have a slightly different view than you. However, let me see what I can learn from this. And I do that when I have respect for myself, because I know what I stand for. And I also have respect for you as the individual, who you also bring your own wealth of experience and wisdom.
mm,
And we, in a conversation, the two of us become even better than we were a minute ago, an hour ago, a day ago.
right.
Right.
I love that you said that trust also encompasses that respect, because I think, especially, not that I'm not a political person whatsoever, but I think one of the things that we can do better as people is just respecting others' opinions and values, and you know what, you do you, I'll do me. I always think it's funny when people debate something that's like so ingrained, like, what's happening in the Eastern world, and it's just like, you're never going to make two people agree on something that's so fundamentally ingrained within themselves. But you can respect the other person's values. And I think that's a lot of what you just said, that innate respect kind of builds that trust. And so, kind of tying it back to that employee passion and that employee trust, when the employee no longer trusts their leader, first of all, how can I even communicate to a leader that I don't trust them? I can't really say I don't trust you, but there's got to be some kind of conversation that we can have so that I can cultivate that trust.
It doesn't, and in some ways it's simple. In some ways it feels very complex to rebuild that trust, or even how do I bridge that gap? So let's just start with, if we're using respect as a common thread, if I'm feeling that if I'm losing trust in my manager, what I've noticed happen, and I'm going to speak from personal experience, but also with, other people I've worked with as well, we start to put that manager into just a particular role, and we lose sight of the fact that that manager is a person.
Mm-hmm.
So approaching that person, if we're not approaching it as that person is a actual person, it feels like it becomes much more challenging, because we are kind of saddled with our own thinking and our feelings around a particular situation, but we've actually kept this manager at arm's length. In some ways, maybe have removed the humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, start with accepting that person that you don't feel completely comfortable with, or maybe not feel completely safe with at this moment, also brings with them their stuff, right?
Right.
And having that conversation with somebody, if you're to be really direct and say, I just don't trust you, or I don't feel safe around you, that actually puts the other person on a bit of a real protective stance, right?
Yeah.
So by you being direct in that sort of way, you're actually not really helping to foster psychological safety for that conversation to happen.
Mm-hmm.
My suggestion, or what I know to really be true, is really see that person for who they are. Forget the role, forget that title, if you can. Look into that person's eyes, or if you aren't, or if you're all like remote, think about, who is this person? And I would say, bring to the conversation a real depth of curiosity. Say, help me understand, because here's how I'm receiving the information, or what I believe you have said would be like basically the things I need to get done. May I offer what I'm seeing?
Mm.
Can I enlighten you? I want to enlighten you and kind of share from my perspective. And at the same time, can you help me understand as best possible what might be some of these other things going on that I don't typically see, that I'm making assumptions?
Got it. I love that phrase, help me understand. I mean, that's really key. And it's not off-putting, it's not defensive. Just help me understand your thought process on whatever. It makes such a big difference. So it makes it a much easier conversation as well when you're coming at from that curiosity. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a balance here too, because there's definitely, I would say, start the conversation with curiosity, right? Because what you're demonstrating from behaviorally is you have a level of acceptance and respect for that individual, and an openness, right? So when we talk about communication and building trust, it is, the two foundational behaviors are acceptance and openness. Those are the behaviors that drive our trust. It's around the communication. Now, you can have a fabulous conversation that feels accepting and open, and yet you might still not feel that level of trust developing. And that's because there's another element to building trust, and that is consistency. Right? So
Mhm.
the two other behaviors that we know to be true around building trust is, how congruent am I being with my words and my actions? And how reliable am I? Can I actually follow through on those words and those actions? And so if you're challenged by a relationship, in this context, we've been talking about, like, what if I don't trust my manager, or I don't feel safe with my manager? Start with a conversation that's open and curious, right? It's accepting, but then don't just leave the conversation and then go, oh, that felt good. Say, okay, so what are we going to do about whatever we just talked about?
Uh,
And what's our commitment to one another for what we do when we leave this office or when I leave this Zoom call? That starts to move you into the consistency that's required to build trust around congruence and reliability,
hmm.
right? Now you're slowly starting to build that foundation of trust or rebuild it.
Yes. That's so interesting because I'm working on some energy work, just with like energy centers. And there's like three levels where you kind of start with safety and stability. Then when that's established, you moved into trust and faith. And then when that's established, you go into accomplishments. And you kind of just describe that, it's just like you kind of have to set the foundation and then, but what are you going to do about it? And I think that's super powerful. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the word psychological safety. Not everybody knows what that means. So let's talk about what that is and why is that important, especially from a leadership perspective. When you're trying to lead a team, why is it important to build that psychological safety?
Oh my gosh. So why is it important? It is important because, let me look at it from the manager's perspective or the leader's perspective. Inevitably, some sort of a situation, let's just call it a problem, that something has to be decided. And we need to decide to go in a particular direction. And when we make that decision to go in a direction, inevitably there's some sort of change, right? It's going to be different than what it's been. So we just address, there's an idea, there's something in front of us, problem, decision, let's make a change. When we're all faced with the change, our innate response will be, is this change good or bad? Like, as humans, right? We want to put things into nice little boxes. Life is a bit more nuanced than that. And yet, when we put things into a box, which is really natural for so many of us, if we say this is good, like the neuroscience behind it says, all right, so our oxytocin might be up, the serotonin might be up, the cortisol would be down, right? The cortisol tells us, like, oh my heavens, do I need to flee from this? Do I need to fight? And so the psychological safety comes in from saying, what about the people who say, I don't know that I'm on board yet? Instead of me saying, I don't know if I'm on board yet, they might go, oh, this is bad.
Yeah.
And when they say this is bad, all of a sudden they have a cortisol spike. That cortisol spike means you're going to sense some sort of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't feeling safe. As a leader, you're thinking, well, I just said this is where we're going. Like, how is there going to be any harm in this? Like, everyone's going to be okay. For that person, they're not feeling secure in how to best express themselves. Now, I mean, if you're really fortunate, you might have, people who are courageous enough to speak through that fear, but not everyone does.
Right.
Right? I think as a leader, that psychological safety is so paramount to creating trust, because what you're really trying to do is create an environment that allows people to be okay with not being totally on board yet with a particular change or a direction. And then talking through that. So what is it that is bothering you? What is the story that you're creating or you've developed, or how you're interpreting the story? And what is that making you feel? And what does that mean?
Mm.
People will jump to well, that means I'm not going to have a job. Well, that means they don't need me. I mean, we can go into, I call it the top shelf stuff. Like, we just go right for the really premium things.
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, oh, it's something different and I am being asked to show up in a slightly different way. Okay,
Uh-huh.
let's see what I can experiment. How might I grow from this? Right. So what we're also saying is that when psychological safety is important to keep not only yourself, but keep your team in a growth mindset.
Yes.
Right. When you get into that fixed mindset, you're not innovative. You're not, looking at the what's possible. And your team, your organization tends to just remain status quo. That status quo is not sustainable
Right.
because things are changing. So I'm sorry, that may have been a long way around talking about psychological safety, and I probably go on about that all day. So let me pause and do a check-in. Am I?
Sure.
Is
So
that
I guess what I'm hearing you say is that psychological safety is the emotional safety of an individual feeling, like you said, courageous enough to be able to speak up, or at least to process their feelings, to be seen and heard by the leadership. Is that kind of in a nutshell what it is?
Thank you for summarizing that for me. Yes. Thank you. Beautifully said.
Okay, good. Well, obviously, and when you're a leader, you're trying to like, especially in these days. I was interviewing a guest a couple of weeks ago, and she's an adaptability coach, and she works with companies to help their team adapt. And she was saying, obviously, with artificial intelligence nowadays, technology. She said technology is going to exponentially speed up in the next 10 years. So it's going to evolve so fast in the next 10 years over the entire history of technology. So it's just going to go at warp speed. And a lot of leaders are having challenges kind of bringing their team on board with all the change and trying to adapt to it so quickly because everything is moving at warp speed. So, I know you're a leadership coach. So how do you help the people that you work with, the leaders, to kind of bring those people, with them instead of just leaving them behind? And of course, this is called No Woman Left Behind. So it's really important to teach leaders how to bring your team with you.
Oh my gosh. Right. So, so we started with, passion and connecting to your passion and building trust and the psychological safety, right? Those all seem very foundational to what you're just speaking to is yes, the world is changing, especially with technology, so much so that it becomes very easy for us to lose our sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders, that is reminding your team so that no one gets left behind about why are we here in the first place? What is our purpose? The company might have a vision statement, they'll call it a mission statement. I tend to use that language of purpose because it really gets to why are we here? Why were we formed in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Our systems, our processes, the technology may be changing and changing so much so that that's all we focus on and we forget what's our role in all of this. And maybe the role shifts a little bit, but as a leader, I think it's really important. And I'm reminded of what we were also talking about earlier is pausing to reflect back on your values. Have they reprioritized? Is there a different way of defining them now? I think the same thing happens for purpose, right? And so for leaders, it is coming back and revisiting why was this team formed in the first place? And then how do we want to be with one another, given what's laying like in front of us in the direction that we're headed, right? Then we go back and look at it. So what is our direction? Like, where are we headed? What are we doing? But come back to that purpose. That's the why. That brings the people together. And that's the piece that the technology will not replace. That's what makes us as human beings unique.
Yes.
So
Yes,
revisit
I
our
agree. And I think nowadays, especially with AI, where you can just like ask it to produce anything. I'm a big proponent of AI, especially in your job search and things like that. But LinkedIn actually just gave me a year of Perplexity Pro. And Perplexity Pro is the bomb. I mean, it like pulls, it's really good for research. So, but it's just so cool how you can use this information. And a lot of people are just still very hesitant to even like go into that direction. So, just doing some research myself, 33% of companies are already using AI. 17% of individuals are already using AI in their job search process. And if companies and employees don't kind of get with the program, and skill up, they're going to be left behind too. So, I mean, it's a dual thing from leaders and then from employees as well. And then from the leader's perspective, obviously it's really stressful to be a leader with everything changing so quickly. You have your own job because you're not there just to lead people. You have a job, you have duties and responsibilities. So, how do leaders keep that sustainability? How do they keep that agility to keep doing what they're doing at high performing levels and then still be there for their teams?
Oh, great question, right? Yeah. Well, first, let's just acknowledge that I think what you're saying is like, how do we maintain or build our resilience?
Yes. Yeah.
Through all of that, right? And I do think we are definitely in an age where we are looking much more closely at our understanding of what resilience means.
Mm-hmm.
And so offering up, so as a leader, how do I handle myself and care compassionately for myself as well as my team? Like having those conversations around how are we shifting now? How are we showing up now this week? And maybe even do like a month end recap of like, okay, team, what were we able to accomplish? What came up for us that was a surprise that made us accomplish things in a different way or just accomplish something totally different that we didn't even expect? And
Mm.
celebrate that stuff. So, we had spoken about a reflective practice. I think this is going to be really paramount for us as leaders, for, the people we're leading is where and how do you want to weave in a reflective practice for yourself and your team? That becomes just your mode of operation, right? Because things are moving so quickly. If it's easy to feel like we get swept into that wave, and we can, right? But it's like, are we going to fight that wave or are we going to flow with it?
Right.
Right. And there's also something I've noticed over the years, and when I do some work with equine, like leadership, it's groundwork with horses as our mentors. One of the things I've learned early on was you go slow to go fast. You look at the horses in the field, they can get to where they want to in just a few steps. They're not running and scattering, it's not chaos. Sometimes I think the way technology is moving and the way our businesses are moving, it can feel chaotic. We can go into that quick movement with really deliberate steps. That's
Mm.
the practice.
Imagine a space where your career aspirations are supported by a community that truly understands your journey. A space designed for women like you, ready to elevate their careers. Our monthly membership isn't just about career advancement. It's about growing confidence, gaining clarity, and building lasting connections. From expert training and monthly workshops to a custom career roadmap, everything you need to climb higher is within reach. Join a supportive community where group coaching and networking turn your professional goals into achievable milestones. Celebrate your wins, big and small, with a network of women who are as invested in your success as you are. Are you ready to unlock the leader within? Join us and let's be brave, be bold, and take action together. And I know again, working with leaders, you practice or you teach the 7 habits of conscious leadership. What is that about?
Oh gosh. Oh, well, a lot of what we already just talked about, right? I speak of gratitude and having a reflective practice in your daily I would say again, I'll say your daily practice for me using that word a lot. It is part you, right? And then it's part how do I engage with others, right? So it is the gratitude, it's the appreciation, it is how do I stay open to hearing other people's thoughts and beliefs and their perspective, right? Where do I want to take action? Right. So
Mm.
there's an inner and an outer quality to our 7 practices of leadership. I think most importantly, the one I want to highlight for today, based on our conversation, is when you start with gratitude, you start to ground yourself in this notion of why am I here? What am I thankful for? What that does for us, just mentally, right? The neuroscience behind that is it opens up or a greater access to our prefrontal cortex,
Mhm.
which is the area that we need in our brain to make all of these decisions that we're faced with on a day-to-day basis. Right. And so when they say, well, how do I do this? How do I handle things much more quickly? How do I handle all of the resistance that I'm feeling from my teams? It might sound really simple and it may not sound super powerful, but the tip is like start with grounding yourself in gratitude and self-love and compassion, and then extend that to others.
I love that. I think that's huge because when you come at everything from gratitude, you can relate to your team as people, as individuals, as human beings versus just an employee. So
Yeah.
it's just such a different perspective to look at it from. So I really like that. So let's talk a little bit about tackling the myths about feminine leadership. I know being a woman in the corporate world, we still only get like 80 women promoted for every 100 men. We still only make 82 cents for every dollar that, men make. So I really want to talk about how women show up as leaders versus men and how we can tackle those myths about that feminine leadership is not good.
Right. Well, why we think it's not good is because historically we've been thinking that to be a leader, we exert a certain kind of strength, right? And we were looked at showing emotion or being compassionate as a weakness. Yes, it may feel soft. Yes, it may be harder to measure, but the feminine leadership, the principles of feminine leadership need to also be balanced with some of our principles of masculine leadership. I
Okay.
think it's been historically very unbalanced. That is not sustainable.
Right.
Now, when people look at women in the workplace, I think one of the things that women do bring is the way they approach empathy is just different from men. Historically, it has been a lot of men in leadership. And like, a group of friends that you're familiar with, right? We hang around people that we kind of feel like we are very comfortable with it. They're a lot like us. When we bring women into leadership, oftentimes it's a woman that feels like she has to adapt to the boys' club.
Hmm.
And I know things are changing, and yet it still is very pervasive. And that adaptability, that is a strength for us as women in the workplace. Use that, invite others who may not view that adaptability as a strength to show them what is possible when you adapt, right? When you adapt, you listen differently, right? There's the empathy. When you adapt, because you are listening in a different way and empathizing with others, you actually find common ground so that now you can collaborate and co-create together. Now, it might feel like it takes longer to do that. I think from a masculine, energetic sort of way of leading, we think when we don't get to that result fast enough that we're failing.
Yes.
And I would posit that that is completely untrue. I would say that if we take a bit longer to bring everybody along with us and walk beside us, we achieve probably more than we thought we could. If we're timing it, does it feel like it takes longer? May it take a little longer? Yes. But you know what happens at the end? You have less bloodshed. Right? I say, I don't want to sound dramatic about it, but I've witnessed this firsthand where teams and organizations, they get the results, right? They post the numbers. The board loves the numbers. The investors love the numbers, but the culture of that organization is toxic.
Yes.
And turnover occurs and people are leaving and we're looking for something else. When we use our gifts and our strengths of empathetic leadership and being much more collaborative, using our intuitive nature along with being logical, right? We want to balance that, actually creating a culture where people feel that they belong, they have a
Mm.
sense of purpose, and we still hit the numbers.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm actually seeing now the organizations where you have at least half of the leadership, like at the board level or at the executive level of both men and women, those companies are much more profitable. Much
I
more
love that. I love that you're seeing that trend. And yes, you're right. The world is changing and many more women are acquiring higher degrees than men now. And I think last time I checked, there was like 55 female CEOs in the Fortune 500. So, but that's just only 10%, right? So we still have work to do. But I think the world is changing. And for the first time in, a long, long time, I feel like so many of us coaches, leadership coaches, we're kind of pushing together in the same way to kind of bring everybody to that emotional intelligence, that understanding. And it's so funny as you were describing the culture being toxic and, yes, the numbers are there, but the people aren't happy. I vividly remember being in the corporate world and the high senior leadership. They're like, you got to do this by such and such date. And all the people that were either managers or people at the desk were like, but why? If we do it that way, it's going to, cause bloodshed. It's going to cause all kinds of problems. And the senior leadership was adamant that it had to be done. So, okay, fine, we'll deploy it. And sure enough, it was a crap show. It was like, and that happened way more many times than I care to remember. But I always thought to myself, it's like, I don't understand the whole just push it out to push it out because you want to meet, that check mark that it was done by a certain date, but it wasn't a successful rollout. And so what is the point?
Well, it's certainly in balance, right? And earlier I mentioned like how we build trust and how we approach relationships. We all come at from a very different lens, or I would just say a priority. And if we haven't really kind of figure out, well, how do I build trust? We continue to operate in the same way, right? And so being reliable, like if I say, hey, this is the goal and we're going to get to this goal and do it, and I do it, I'm like, yay, I'm reliable, right? But what we were just describing is people were saying, building trust and getting what we need to do is all about reliability. And especially in our Western culture and organizations, we are judged by that reliability. Yet it leaves a whole bunch of people scratching their heads and going, but I don't understand. Why? This is taking too much blood, sweat, and tears to do it this way.
Yeah.
And so I think let's not make people wrong for who want to check the box, but let's invite them to say, is there a different process you can use along the way to get that box checked?
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's where the emotional intelligence comes along, right? It's like that's the big piece because when leaders are aware of how their teams are feeling, what their struggles are with, and I always share that there's nothing wrong with you going in and stepping out from your office and going to talk to the people that are actually doing the job at the desk. What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you struggling with? Like, I never understood why senior leaders didn't take the time to do that because they could avoid a whole lot of pain from both their perspective and the people's at the desk perspective. So I think in this day and age, a lot of us talk about emotional intelligence a lot, but I think more than ever, emotional intelligence is key. So is that something that you kind of work with your leaders on?
Absolutely. It is. And what you're talking about is when we're talking about emotional intelligence and just getting out and asking people, it is about warmth, right? So I have to be warm and accepting and bringing people into like the conversation. It's understanding, it's asking. So what's it like in your world? Or what's it like what's the world perspective from where you stand? And then encouraging people, right? So if we're to distill a lot of that emotional intelligence components, I would bring it down to the three things of it's warmth and understanding and encouragement.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
And,
it. That's being a human being.
yeah, it's being a human being and it's building trust. It's, for those who say, oh, I don't know, those words feel too soft to me. I'm really uncomfortable with that. the other way I might offer it up is to say, go out and talk to the people who are actually doing the work, because what you're doing then is you're doing your own market research.
Yes.
You're doing your market research. You're also getting a better handle on, as a leader, right? You have people who are going to have perspectives of how you lead. And oftentimes when I'm working with leaders and I'm brought in to work with a leader who's challenged by something, and usually it's because team members have said, I'm ready to quit because of this person, right?
Mhm.
Then I'll come out and talk to that leader and they're like, oh, the warmth, the heart stuff you talk about, I don't get it. And I said, well, let's look here. When I get this feedback here, I don't doubt that you're not doing everything that you think you can do or should be doing to lead, but clearly from the feedback, you have a PR problem, right? So let's fix this PR problem. Let's go out and do some market research. Basically, what I'm inviting them to do is engage with people in a way that gets them listening, gets them talking. And then without necessarily saying it right up front with them, is I'm talking about warmth, understanding, and encouragement. You build trust. So, it's about finding that languaging and helping those, helping people understand it's market research, is understanding your PR issue if you're not leading as effectively as you could be, should be, or want to.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so I know you're a leadership coach and you have your own company, right? And so tell me a little bit about your story. I want to know, like, how did you end up being a leadership coach, and you have experience in the corporate world. So tell me about your story and then how you ended up setting up your company and what you do.
All right, let's see if I can do it in just a few moments, right? My experience, spans like 3+ decades. I started out my career in the learning and development space, working for a small consulting firm. And that's actually so I have a love of psychology. That's my, educational background. And I really thought I wanted to be a therapist, but I also needed to pay for school. So I happened to just start working for this organization that worked with other companies to build their teams and communicate more clearly, handle conflicts. And that's when I realized I can apply my love of human behavior inside an organization, right? And also merge it with, I'm just so fascinated by how businesses work, right? So that started the career. So I was kind of like, on the outside looking into many of these organizations. And at some point along in my career, I thought, this is really neat. I'm learning so much. However, I know, when that consultant leaves, there's a bunch of other stuff that happens inside an organization.
Mhm.
So part of my goal, some of it felt intentional, some of it was just, it felt like happenstance. Like, I need to work internal. I want to be an internal L&D leader, or somehow just work internal in an organization to better understand the dynamics that, they happen in a much larger setting. So I did that for a number of years, heading up learning and development departments within other organizations. And I came to this like realization. I'm thinking this was the late 90s, I believe, when the learning and development we were doing was helpful. Like when we would do workshops, leadership development, it was helpful, but I kept thinking, like, how do we sustain what the ahas are in these workshops? Because they would fall off, right? Like, and as an educator person, I'm like, how do we make this stick? So I started to explore this thing called coaching. And a number of other consultants I was working with had said they were coaches. I was like, tell me more. And I observed them and I thought, at least the ones that I was observing, that doesn't seem any different than the workshops. We're just telling. There's something else. There's something that's missing. And so as I dove into this field of coaching, it just really resonated with me because it felt like the missing piece for how do we develop as human beings and make it stick.
Mhm.
We all want choice. We want to continue to push the envelope of our own learning and our growth. And I just gravitated towards coaching. So I began my education in becoming a coach when I was internal in an organization. As I was there, I ended up over my career moving from one of those organizations I absolutely loved, but things happen, mergers, acquisitions, and whatnot. And finally, I found my way into another organization, which just provided such a wealth of opportunity. And yet there were elements of that organization that weren't resonating with me after a while. And my sense was the next step for me in my career was, all right, I think I can have a much stronger voice if I were to branch out on my own. And so that's what brought me to like where I am today of having my own, coaching and consulting. And along the way, having that voice, really figuring out like, what is it that I stand for?
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that interest me, but I think what really got me thinking about, can I have a stronger voice if I were to show up fully as a coach and less of an L&D leader, which there's nothing wrong with that. I love the L&D department. So this is not any trash talking on that. It's just what was right for me. What I also noticed is sometimes as an external person coming in to share what I know to be true, people listen in a different way. And so I feel deeply for those who are internal, who are trying to have a voice, and they're saying the same things that I might say or share. But then the executive team, who may have been hearing this internally for however how long, then turn to the external person and go, it's a great idea. So sorry, I may have gone off on a bit of a tangent, but just I want to like send the love out to those working internally because I feel ya. And I think there's a way to partner with some of the external coaches and consultants as a way to boost your voice, right?
Yeah. I love that it's kind of what happened to me. It's like you're kind of going along. And for me, I always say that I kind of was like pushed into this direction. It wasn't a choice. It was, I just started my whole thing started with volunteering, just volunteering and giving my time back to women in need for career advice and stuff like that. And that's kind of just snowballed into I'm a full-time entrepreneur. And I help women in the corporate world advance their careers with intention and confidence. And it was just like, I was one of those people that, oh, I need my paycheck in the bank every 2 weeks, and I would never be an entrepreneur. And here is me now being an entrepreneur, which I never thought it would happen that way. So I think, like you said, sometimes our past just kind of carry us to where we're supposed to be. And obviously you're very experienced in the leadership space. So what are some of the tools that you use to help those leaders when they come to you?
Yes. Well, right, because a lot of how I work with the leaders is, it's definitely their leadership journey and right and how they're evolving. But a lot of that revolves around their mindset and how they communicate. Right. And so I look at it from the behavioral perspective. So in some ways I say I'm a behaviorist because
Mm,
I'm listening for and watching how is somebody working with their own thought process around something. So it's like almost like a self-communication, but then it also extends to how are they communicating with others. Right.
yeah.
So number of the tools that I use, I do look at assessment tools that can help you better clarify your values and your strengths and your behavioral styles or your communication styles. But I think some of the core tools that I use are around this model of trust. So we've actually been talking about it's acceptance and openness, it's congruence and reliability. So I use that as the foundational piece to say, so we might understand your values and your strengths and your behavioral style, but how does that relate to you building trust? How does
Mm,
that relate or where does that show up for like your strengths in building trust? And might there be some blind spots for that? And that could be with you as a leader. It could be you leading a team, you leading multiple teams, right? So whether it's a business unit or an organization, I think that one of the core tools that I use with them is how do you build trust and where do your values drive your behaviors and drive those behaviors that really build trust.
mm,
Those are the core ones. There's other tools. And like I said, like if you're leading a team, so like how aligned is your team? And we're going to look at trust in your team, but we're also going to look at what's your purpose, your value, your visions of the team, the roles, the goals, and the priorities, right? You've got to be like a little future oriented, but then you got to get down to the nitty gritty of what happens day to day. Right. And then zooming out even further, like what's the culture? Like,
yeah.
are you instilling trust? So if we've been talking about how do I build trust as a leader, that's one way, but how is that messaging and the essence of who you are trickling down and out throughout the organization. And so, how are you building trust across the entire organization to create the culture that you want to create, the culture that creates those high performing teams? From there are some other nuanced tools that we'll get into to help you understand as a leader. So, what do I need to focus on first?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Interesting. So the phrase that you said earlier, go slow to or start slow to go fast,
Okay.
that's kind of what is coming up for me right now because when you think of leadership, leaders don't want to talk about trust and compassion and love and joy and all those things. They're like, that's like you said earlier, feel good stuff. But the reality is that companies that aren't embracing the full person as a human being with problems and feelings and things that are happening in their personal world, and they're not seeing them as people, those are the leaders that are not going to be as successful as other leaders that are embracing the human as a whole. So companies that are like, no, you have to be in the office every single day are not going to keep, people as much as, we have a flexible schedule. I want you in the office 2 days, any 2 days is fine. It's just such a different conversation, right?
Well, it is. And you know what I'm reminded of, Rosie, is that we think about, so what are what business are we in? Right? What field are we in? And people say, oh, yeah, I make, electronic components, or we're in banking, we're mortgage, we're in healthcare. So it's about, curing a disease. And yes, those are all true, but I want to stand back and say, no, what's your real product? Your product is people, because out those people, you won't have the other vision or the mission that you really have established, right? So I think inviting all leaders, regardless of what field you're in, what industry you're in, is to stand back and say, so what's my product? My first and primary product are my people. Okay,
I
so it's
love that.
people that is the most important. And when you have people, well, now we need to talk about heart and understanding and compassion and curiosity. It's all of this stuff, like that soft stuff, which in many ways, I think the work that we do, like, we can create a guidebook on that. But many people feel like there is no guidebook. Give me the playbook, give me the guidebook for this, and I can figure it out. People are a little more nuanced than ones and zeros.
Yes.
And it gets confusing, and it's so complex, and we can't fit it into an easy box, and we want to step away from that. I think that's what a lot of just people, but also we see this in leadership. They do. They're like, I can't deal with that. That's
Yeah,
just not my thing.
exactly. Exactly.
But if your people are your product, isn't it your thing?
Yeah. I think that's so ironic. All right, Jenna. Well, we've had such a wonderful conversation today about leadership, but is there maybe one actionable takeaway that you can leave our audience with?
Right. I would say, given what we've talked about, I think that an undercurrent theme that I'm picking up on is it's staying open, right? It's the curiosity. So it's the what's possible.
Mm,
And I'd invite people, because we also talked about reflective practice and how important that is. When you're feeling that you are lacking passion or you've lost that pizzazz, going to invite people to explore the what's possible through a reflective practice and rewrite your story. You
mm,
write your story, like, what's the situation? What's the story I have about this situation? And what else is coming up for me, right? Those are the feelings or the thoughts and the beliefs that are coming up because of that story. And then examine, well, given what I'm feeling about that situation and that story, what is or is not possible based on those feelings, those
mm.
thoughts, those
I
beliefs.
really like that. In certified high performance coaching, we talk a lot about bringing the energy and how you can shift your energy. And that reminds me a little bit about that because you can make a decision and a choice to rewrite your story, as you said, and become passionate in spite of everything that's happening around you and still be happy and grounded versus, oh, I hate this job. I don't want to be here. It's just such a completely different story in your head. So thank you for that.
Right? You're welcome. Yeah, please rewrite your story. See what else is possible, and shift your energy. Go towards the energy you want and
Yeah,
decide. Yeah.
I love that. Well, Jenna, thank you so much for everything. This has been a wonderful conversation. Any final words?
Oh, well, one, thank you so much for holding the space for our conversation today, Rosie. It's been such a delight. And final words are to say, ignite your passion by, exploring what else is possible. Anything
Mm,
else is possible. It's your choice.
wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I am so happy when I'm able to have insightful conversations like the one that I just had with Jenna. Okay, so just wanted to break down a few of the key items that we chatted about. First off, Jenna really emphasized the importance of reflective practice. Taking time to reflect on your values and your purpose and your goals isn't just something that you want to do once in a while. It's really important for you to keep that passion in your career alive. She also reminds us that trust is really the backbone of effective leadership. You want to build trust. You want to do it by building respect and acceptance and being open and also have a little bit of consistency and reliability. So these are all tools that really make a leader stand out. And let's not forget the importance of psychological safety. Creating that environment where people are free to be themselves, to speak up and share their ideas and collaborate is so critically important for you to have a team that is going to be able to be innovative and grow together. As far as Jenna's actionable takeaway, she says to focus on incorporating warmth, understanding, and encouragement into your leadership style. By doing this, you're not just building trust, but you're fostering a culture where the team feels safe. So I really like that actionable tip for sure. All of Jenna's contact information is going to be on the episode website. And if you haven't done so already, please take the promotion readiness checklist. This is where you will figure out how ready you are to be promoted. And also, take a look at the Unlocked Leader Within membership. My goal with this membership is to get you promotion ready, to be able to gain confidence, to advocate for yourself, and to build an amazing community of incredible women that support each other. Those links will also be on the episode website. So, with that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.